My wife is destroying my relationship with my son. Since my son was a small child, my wife's parenting philosophy has been that mothers should only provide comfort while fathers are fully responsible for discipline. This has meant that anytime my son did something wrong, I would always be left to explain why it was wrong and implement a punishment. After I would ground him or reprimand him, my wife would always rush over to him and tell him how much she loves him, etc. This has been a source of tension between us for a long time, and I've tried to sometimes swap roles and be the parent who provides comfort. In these instances, usually it was my wife that would discover he did something wrong and would ask me to reprimand him. I would tell her to, but she simply would not, and eventually I would relent. This all came to a head a few days ago. My wife, 46 female, and I, 49 male, had to leave town for 2 days to visit her aunt, 78 female, who has been ill. We left my son, a Ford Mustang, at home. My son, 17 male, has driven the car but only under supervision and isn't allowed to drive it if I'm not around. After we came back and arrived home, I went into the bathroom and my son told my wife that he had taken the car out with his friends and caused some damage while we were out of town. When I came out, my wife told me what had happened, and when I asked my son about it, he apologized and then added that the damage was very light. I felt very betrayed and went to check the car. It had a bent wheel and damage to the bumper and headlight, much more severe than I expected. I went back inside the house and yelled at my son, expressing how he lied about the damage and called him an idiot as the damage clearly indicated he had been driving recklessly, endangering himself and others. In anger, I said, 1. That my son was the least intelligent member of his friend group and that they took advantage of that. 2. That he was basically a toddler and I would start having to hide items from him so he doesn't break them. 3. He would be paying for the damages. My son apologized again and didn't say much the rest of the day. She suggested I talk to him more gently before bed so that he doesn't resent me. I replied that I've already said everything I wanted to say and that if she wants to talk to him, she can. She then expressed that my reaction has been disproportionate in how items can be fixed, and lastly how boys will be boys. Exhausted from the day, I went to bed without a real response to this. The next day after my son came from school and I sat him down for a talk, I told him that I did not think he was an idiot, but reiterated that his actions that day were dumb. I then asked him to tell me what exactly happened, and I would remain silent the entire time he narrates. Later, my wife told me that she thinks it's too harsh for our son to pay for the car's repairs. She said it was my decision to buy an expensive car that would require expensive repairs, and again, how boys will be boys. She then mentioned that while she does acknowledge what our son did was dumb, but said that it is perfectly normal for a kid his age to want to impress his friends. I have no patience for the boys will be boys mentality that she has repeatedly brought up, and told her that it was not a valid excuse for anything, and it is irresponsible for her to want our son, who is soon going to be going to university in another city, to have this way of thinking. To me, it is dangerous. She told me that I'm overreacting and have blown this whole thing out of proportion. She also mentioned that we can't micromanage him, and again that boys do stuff that we can't keep track of every little thing he does. I told her even if we can't track every little thing he does, he'll be held accountable either by us or by the law. She became quite upset now, saying that I'm being too controlling and that I'm using fear tactics. She also said clearly I was unable to accept my son living a life he could enjoy, and how I value the opinion of strangers more than hers and our son's ability to enjoy life. I told her that she's delusional and her way of thinking will get our son in trouble. We have not spoken since then. 100% Dad, I'm on your side. That is going to get your son in a lot of shit. I want to just have fun. I want to have fun. Consequences to my actions? What? Like, you have to teach him that before the world does. I found out that my child-free boyfriend of 3 years had a 4-year-old child that he knew about. Yesterday, I broke it off with him. I honestly don't know why I stalled in doing this, but I think I was just in shock and couldn't process the whole situation. There was no getting through this. It was done from the moment I found out. If you didn't know, I found out my ex had a child when we went to meet a financial advisor and accountant before we moved in together. Before I broke it up with him, I decided to meet him in person to get my things back and give him his. I met him in a park in a public place, and I went with a friend who stayed nearby. I honestly wanted to know why he did this, why he wasted both of our time, why he couldn't go for someone who either had a child or wanted them in the future. He basically said that he knew when he met me that he wanted to pursue me. Though we've been together for 3 years, I have known him for 5. When we first started dating, he lived 3 hours from me, and we moved his business and his whole life so our relationship wouldn't be long distance. We were introduced by a friend of his about 5 years ago, and in the 2 years before we started dating, he was more of an acquaintance that would come into town to visit his friend. His friend and I were close, so I think that's how he got to know a lot about me, like how I was child-free and would never date a man who had a possibility of having a child or wanting one. When he asked me out, I not only asked the friend that introduced us if he wanted kids, but I asked my ex as well, and he said that he never wanted children and he didn't have any. For the 3 years we were together, we also discussed not having children numerous times, so I thought we were on the same page. Clearly, that was all a lie. When I met him at the park, he had a file full of documents, and he brought his file so he could explain to me why he did what he did and the lengths he went through so that we could be a couple. As he explained what happened, he showed me proof, especially of the court paperwork. First, that the child, that's how he referred to his son the whole conversation, is actually 5 and not 4. His son recently had a birthday. When we met, unbeknownst to me, my ex was already a father and the baby was a few months old. He had gotten a former ex pregnant and she had a kid and they had 50-50 custody for about a year. According to him though, they weren't together. He was an active father and they had an amicable relationship. As he got to know me and found out the info from his friend, he realized I would never give him a chance because he had a child. I vaguely remember him visiting and all of us going to lunch with other friends, and he and his friends kept bringing up strange scenarios that would make me change my mind about dating men with children. For example, saying something like, if the guy was perfect for you in every way, but he had a child or wanted children, you would never be with him? And my answer was always no, because my perfect guy didn't want kids. Knowing that I would never date a man who had a child, he decided when his child was 1 that he had to get rid of that responsibility. I'm not joking, that's what he said. He slowly started to see his child less, and it was bizarre listening to him methodically explain how he removed himself from every responsibility that had to do with his child. From lessening the days he saw him, to not picking him up from daycare, to not going to doctor's appointments. He did this over months until his ex saw that he was serious about not being involved in any way but monetary. He eventually went to his ex and told her that he wanted to terminate his rights. He would pay for child support more than what was required, but he didn't want any responsibility. In addition to that, he paid his ex to go to court with him to change the child's last name and remove his and just leave the mother's name. Once the child's last name had been changed, child support had been set up and he terminated his rights. Only then did he ask me out. He said he did all of this for me so that we could have a chance and that he wanted to come to me child-free as well, which is why he waited for everything to be settled in court first. So he basically spent a year getting rid of his child, and he presented it as a challenge he went through to get me, and he didn't understand why I saw that as completely scary and unhinged. To finally throw away everything related to his old life, he then moved to my city and started again. I asked him if his parents knew about his child. He said yes, that though they didn't like his ex, they were active grandparents until he decided to terminate his rights. Once he did, his whole side of the family cut the child off, wanted nothing to do with him. I have met his family and extended family many times, and not once was the child mentioned. How do you do that? How do you just deprive your grandson of a relationship with your side of the family just because your son decided to end his involvement? He told me he would give me time, but that I helped him realize that he was child-free and that we belonged together. I told him that it was over and I never wanted to see him again, that there was no fixing this, and I left him after that. I'm now figuring out how to leave the city immediately, but I can't for a few months since I have a job contract to fulfill. In the meantime, I'm looking for another job far away and avoiding him and his family, who keeps trying to get in contact with me to explain his side. I've also ended the friendship with a friend who knew he had a kid and went along with the lies. I know that his other friends in the city we live in probably knew as well, but I have no proof of that. However, there's no way only one friend knew, especially since a lot of them have been friends for decades. I just don't understand what the end goal was here. I don't understand how he doesn't see how wrong he was in what he did. I don't understand how he thought he could make a whole child disappear. Though I am child-free, children should be protected, should be loved and cared for, and eliminating yourself as a father figure and then having your family withdraw their involvement is going to have a severe impact on this child once they understand. I know I did nothing to cause this, but one day this child will realize his dad gave him up to be with a woman he barely knew, and I just can't imagine the trauma that is going to cause. I can't believe he did this to me, and more importantly to his son. He has shown me he's capable of anything, and my main goal is to now leave the city. Before I leave though, my plan is to tell everyone, and I mean everyone, about what he did, but for now, I'm laying low and just going to ignore him for my own safety. Whoa, dude, that is like this deserves like a Netflix special. Oh my God.
Am I wrong for ordering my coffee in a takeaway cup but drinking it in the cafe? So I went out with my friends to a coffee shop after lunch and ordered coffees for the group. I got mine in a takeaway cup since I'm always the slowest to finish drinking, and also got a cake that I said I'd eat in for. When the waitress came over and gave me the coffee in the takeaway cup, a friend of mine in the group told me off. Apparently it's rude to order coffee in a takeaway cup and drink it in the establishment, and that it's ruining the vibe for everyone else. She also said that her parents own a cafe, and it's a common understanding that asking for a coffee in a takeaway cup while eating in is a huge faux pas. The thing is, I've always done this and no one has ever told me off. And all the cafes have been more than okay with it. Have I been wrong the whole time without knowing? I'm gonna say honestly, you guys, I see nothing wrong with it. Even if you want to eat in and you get a to-go because it's just more convenient, I really struggle to see the issue. The top comment also says not wrong, and I don't think most people care.